Good morning, fellow programmers. Thanks for joining me. I am T-Pain, and welcome to Let's Learn Python. Feel free to use the skip ahead feature on the right-hand side to jump to any specific sections or the examples if you want. Today we'll be using Python 2.7.4. You can download it from python.org/getIt. Today's focus will be on object-oriented programming. This will be the first part of a three-part series, I believe. This lesson will build on previous lessons, so feel free to go back and watch them again if anything is unclear. Alright, so what is object-oriented programming? Well, object-oriented programming, or OOP, is programming that's based around classes and instances of those classes. Thus, the term objects comes from referring to those instances of those classes. Object-oriented programming revolves around how these classes interact and directly affect one another. One of the most important aspects of object-oriented programming is inheritance. And that's when one class gains all the attributes of another class. So how does this work? Well, let's crack open idle and begin our lesson. Alright, so with idle, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, save this on my desktop as classes_01.py. Make sure you save it with that .py extension so it saves as a Python file. So first we're going to create a base class, and then we're going to create an inheriting class. So let's type class space capital B for base and capital C for class, and then open parentheses object, close parentheses, and end with a colon. So what this is doing is this is creating a class called base class that is inheriting from object. An object is a base class stored somewhere within Python that allows inheritance to actually happen. Alright, so next press enter and type def space print and then uppercase ham, open parentheses, self, close parentheses, colon, enter. Whoops, misspelled def there. And then we're going to type print and of course ham, because we love ham. So next we're going to type class, inheriting class, open parentheses, base class, close parentheses, colon, enter, pass, enter. Enter. So what this is doing is it's creating an inheriting class that will inherit from the base class. Okay, so next we're going to type in at the bottom, unindented, we're going to type x equals and then create an instance of the inheriting class. Open close parentheses, enter, x, and then we're going to access the function created within the base class that's just called printham. Open close parentheses, enter, save, and then press F5 to run it. Perfect. So our program worked beautifully. We created an instance of this inheriting class and then called the function that was created within the base class. Now what happens if we didn't have this object here? I'm going to go ahead and delete it, and you don't have to, but watch what happens. Notice that the program actually compiled correctly, and the reason being is it's inheriting the functions, but we're not actually accessing any variables or attributes within this class. So that's why I compiled correctly. As a good practice, I would recommend always leaving in this base object in here, because when you try to call its init function from this inheriting class, it will not compile. Alright, so why use object-oriented programming? Well, it's a much cleaner way of programming. For instance, if we wanted to make any changes to the base class, it would affect all the inheriting classes. So, for instance, if we were to create a character class, a base character class, which we will hear in a minute, if we wanted to change the health of all the characters across the board at once, or if we wanted to add new ability to all characters at once, we could do that with inheritance. So let's go ahead and try another example. I'm just going to go ahead and select all and delete it to create a fresh new file. We're going to begin by creating a base character class, and then we're going to create a more specific character class. So first we're going to type in class character, open parentheses, object, close parentheses, colon, enter, def underscore init to call the constructor self, colon, enter, and then we're going to create an attribute called health. Self.health is equal to 100. Perfect. And that's it. We've created a simple base class, and now we're going to go ahead and create the inheriting class. So class blacksmith, open parentheses, character, close parentheses, colon, and this is so that we inherit from that base class up above, enter, and then we're going to go ahead and create a constructor for this one as well, with double underscore init, double underscore. We're going to type self again, colon, enter. Next, we're going to be calling an odd function we haven't seen before. We're going to type in super, open parentheses, and then type in the class name that we are currently in. So we're going to type in blacksmith, comma, space, self, close parentheses, And then we're going to type in dot underscore underscore init underscore underscore to access the constructor, and then end with open close parentheses. So what this is going to do is it's going to call the init function from the base class that we inherited from. So go ahead and unindent, back down, enter, enter. And then we're going to go ahead and create an instance of that class by typing bs equals blacksmith, open close parentheses, enter, and then print bs.health. Save, run it. So we ran into a compiler error and it's saying that it has no attribute health. That's because I did a misspelling up here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Save, run, perfect. So this worked out perfectly. Now, what happens if we were to delete this in this object that's inheriting? Now we would not be able to use this function to call the init function from the base class. So let's go ahead and delete it, run it, and now we get that error I was expecting, in which it's saying that there is no base class objects. As a note, you need to have that in there if you're going to be calling the init function from the base character. Can't tell you how many times I've run into errors because of that. Alright, so this can get kind of messy. So what helps is usually to draw out a diagram to visualize what's going on with the inheritance. So the best way to visualize is using UML. And I'll get into that in another lesson, but here's basically what you need to know. The blacksmith is inheriting from the base character class. If we wanted to add characters like the maid and the barber, those would also inherit from the base character class. Let's say we wanted to add a hero class as well. That would also inherit from the base character class. But let's say there's more than one type of hero. Let's say we have an archer, a sorceress, and an ugly man. An ugly man isn't the character you want to be, but they would all inherit from the hero class. So you can see that we can hierarchically build downward, and the final challenges will have more cases just like this. So let's further expand on our past example to include inherited functions. So in the character class, which is the base class, I'm going to go ahead and add in a parameter called name into the constructor or the init function. Next, I'm going to secure it to the instance of the class by using self.name is equal to name. And this is just creating another variable and attaching the passed in variable to it. Finally, I'm going to create another function that's called def print name self in the arguments, enter print, and then self.name. This is just a simple function that's going to print out its own name. Cool. So in the blacksmith class, I'm going to make the following changes. In the arguments of the constructor, I'm going to add in name, comma, forge name. The name is going to be the name of the character, and the forge name is going to be the name of the forge that's going to be stored within the character. All right. And we're going to go ahead and pass down that name that's passed in the parameters of the init function into the base class init. The reason being is we're calling the init function of the base class, so we want to pass in the parameters that are associated with it. Finally, we're going to type in self.forge is equal to, and then capital F-O-R-G-E, and then type in lowercase F-O-R-G-E. This is going to be calling, and then uppercase N for name. And this is a class we're going to create here in a minute, okay? So scrolling down. So in this instance, we're going to be storing an instance of the Forge class within the blacksmith himself. So let's go ahead and create that Forge class real quick. I'm going to go enter, type class Forge, open parentheses, enter, def underscore underscore init underscore self, comma, forge name, close parentheses, enter, and then self.name is equal to forge name. And this is merely so we can stick that name and attach it to this instance of the class. Perfect. So now that we've changed the constructor of the blacksmith class, we need to include parameters within the call of the function. So for the first parameter or name, I'm going to create Bob, comma, and then we're going to enter in the forge's name, and that's going to be Rick's / for the parentheses forge. You can name it whatever you'd like. The reason is Bob killed Rick and took over his forge. So that's why it's called Rick's Forge. Finally, we're going to go ahead and call bs.printName, open close parentheses, to call that function we created in the base class. So print name. And lastly, we're going to print the forge name so we can make sure that it's working. So forge.name. So that way we're going to be accessing the forge and then the name. So I ran into a small error in which it said there's no attribute print name. And that's because I did a slight spelling error right there. I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Rerun it. Perfect. So we can see Bob is printed out, the character's name, and also Rick's Forge is printed out. Perfect. Excellent. So that's all for part 1 of the object-oriented programming. Thank you so much for watching, and great job keeping up. Definitely take a few minutes to investigate these final challenges. I challenge you to see if you can solve them. Based on what you learned today, please leave me a comment below if this helped you at all. Also, do me a huge favor and subscribe to my channel. It would really mean a lot to me. Thank you so much for your support, and keep the dream alive.